Hey, what's going on? It's Jeff here, and thanks for tuning in today's show. And on today's episode, I'm going to share some encouraging words, some amazing truth, and some facts that you may have never heard before. In fact, you may have never even heard this from your church or ministry leader. And here's the deal. The information that I'm going to share with you today will uplift and inspire you to embrace the truth that your story matters and that God has given you a divine power to attract others to Jesus, and that regardless of whether or not you believe it or whatever fear you have about talking to others about Jesus, you can easily learn how to share the gospel so that no matter where you are or who you're speaking to, you can do that with confidence and power. So you ready? All right, let's do this. So before we start, if this is your first time listening to the program, please know that the goal of each show is to help you ignite, strengthen, and live out your faith with passion and purpose. And one of the best ways to do that is to share the gospel. And what I mean by that is to share the good news of Jesus Christ with someone else, how Jesus Christ changed your life for good. And as I say that, you may be thinking right now, wait a second, Jeff, sharing the gospel is a little scary. I don't know what to say, and I don't think my story of salvation is really that cool, which isn't true, by the way, and I don't want to offend anyone. Well, I can tell you that you're not alone. In fact, I've had those same feelings. And not to mention, I've spoken to thousands of people who've had those same thoughts. But you know what's really amazing is every time those believers learn how to share the gospel, their fear goes away. And that's what happened to me. And that's why I created my Faith Without Fear training course and my Faith Without Fear book years ago to teach individuals like you, me, and others how to share the gospel in a simple, natural way. So with that, I'm going to read a quick chapter from that book, Faith Without Fear. And just so you'll know, that chapter is titled Proof in the Numbers. And the reason I wrote that chapter is to show you just how important every Christ follower is in fulfilling the Great Commission. And if you've listened to some of my other podcast episodes, you've heard me say some of these things before. But today, we're going to dig a little bit deeper because I really hope that as you leave this episode today, you're going to leave with the knowledge and the wisdom that, yes, your story matters. In fact, you may want to listen to one of those other episodes, and I'm just going to give you 3 of them real quick. The first one was episode 145, and I titled that show, How You and Your Story Can Impact Others for Good. The next one is episode 132, and I titled that, How God Uses Your Story for His Glory. And then the last one here I just want to tell you about is episode 57, and I titled that podcast, 5 Truths for Sharing Your Faith. So with that, I'm going to start reading here from page 23 of my book, and I'm going to do that from my original notes here from the original draft of that book. And I'll start here by saying, from my research, it's revealed that 90% of born-again believers come to faith through either a friend or a relative. The remaining 10% make a faith-based decision as a direct result of a pastor's witnessing efforts or church experience. In other findings, we see that family members, friends, lay leaders, neighbors, and co-workers were responsible for 83% of new decisions for Christ, whereas full-time ministers accounted for just 17% of those commitments. Did you get that? That means that you have this amazing opportunity, divine opportunity, any given moment, any given day, as you share the gospel to reach somebody else for Jesus Christ. And as you think about those numbers, to me, that's incredible. And seriously, these reports reveal some interesting data. They conclude that the overwhelming majority of individuals who commit their life to Jesus do so through the direct involvement of a friend or a family member. That means somebody like you. In fact, maybe it was you. And even from a conservative perspective, the numbers say it best. They tell us that 8 out of every 10 born-again believers change their eternal destination through the influence of someone other than a clergyman. That means they went from spiritual death to spiritual life through a conversation, i.e., hearing the good news shared from someone like you. That's powerful, isn't it? And so I go on here to write this. Hopefully, these surveys will help you see the importance that you have in reaching the lost. As a result, I pray that you're encouraged to step out in faith and share the good news with others. And when you do, you can be confident knowing that as you plant the seeds of the gospel, you can't fail, regardless of the outcome, even if those individuals reject Christ as our Lord and Savior. Why? Because your success in evangelism is not based on the end result. It's based on your faithfulness to proclaim His name. In other words, you can't lose. Think about this. Every time you share the good news, you're in a win-win-win situation. It's a win because you were faithful in sharing your faith. It's another win because the gospel was heard by another human being. And it's the ultimate win the moment a non-believer accepts God's free gift of salvation. Now, as true as those statements are, only 2% of today's church is actively involved in evangelism. Now, if that's correct, then that means that 98% of believers are disengaged in the ministry of evangelism. That's 2.25 billion out of 2.3 billion Christians as of 2017. And I say 2017 because that's when I wrote the book, which means that the population numbers are bigger, but the percentage is still the same. So here's my question. Don't you think we can do better? I do. Okay, so you may be saying to yourself right now, wait a second, Jeff, 2% sounds really low. I agree. However, the key word here is the word actively. It implies someone who consistently looks for opportunities to share their faith. In other words, that Christian is proactive about initiating and engaging in conversations with the intent and action of verbally sharing the gospel with others, not just asking if that person goes to church or if they believe in God. Now, with that in mind, I hope you can understand why this is so relevant to the state of evangelism in the universal church today. So I go on to write this, and as I read this here, I want you to think about the scenario. And here's what I say. So consider the following scenario. Imagine if every Christian shared the gospel to a different person each year. Just one person. And if so, the entire world's population would have a chance to hear about Christ's atoning sacrifice in less than 2.5 years. Now, how did I get that number? Now, I got that number. My assertion comes from the Pew Research Center's research that there are 2.3 billion professing Christians and a total of 7.3 billion people living in the world as of 2015. Now, remember, I got those numbers years ago because I wrote Faith Without Fear years ago. So what I did was I subtracted that 2.3 billion number of professing Christians. I took that number, subtracted it from the 7.3 billion people living in the world as of 2015, and that number came to 5 billion people. That's 5 billion people that would have heard the gospel in less than 2.5 years. Hands down, it will be the greatest evangelistic endeavor anyone has ever seen. In that short amount of time, the gospel would spread like wildfire. Hearts would transform, and Christians across the globe will be on fire for Jesus. Now, trust me, I know this is a radical concept. In fact, this is how I close this chapter of the book. But isn't that what Christianity is all about? To know Jesus and to make Him known? In every circumstance, whether we feel like it or not, we're called to light up the world with the light of the world. John 8, verse 12. And what better way to do that than to give others the opportunity to hear about and trust in Him? Now, if you allow me, I want to ask you to set this book down for a few moments. That is, if you're reading along with me here with this book, or if you're just listening to this podcast, to just pause. And as you do that, I want you to reflect on this question. And here's the question. What if the above scenario came to fruition in your lifetime? Let me say it another way. What if you and I saw that happen right now and we were a part of it? And as you think about that possibility, I hope you'll take comfort in knowing that it's a reality that can actually happen. And it can be realized if every follower of Jesus Christ does their small part in fulfilling the Great Commission, a task that you may already be doing. And if not, that's okay, because one of the goals of this book and my Faith Without Fear training is to equip you in sharing the gospel with others. And I wrap up that chapter by saying this. I want to acknowledge that I'm fully aware that my example is debatable. I wish it wasn't. However, I think it illustrates the importance that you have in helping others see the light. A truth that the first disciples understood as the Messiah himself appealed to them. And the plea I'm speaking of is the one Jesus made to his followers. He told them in Matthew 9:37, "The harvest truly is plentiful, but the laborers are few." Now, doesn't that verse just make your heart jump, igniting a flame inside you to be one of those workers who boldly proclaims the gospel? I believe it does, because you're one of those elite warriors right now, listening to the sound of my voice. Well, as we wrap up today's episode, I just want to leave you with a few questions. The first one was, what do you think? Are you fired up? And are you ready to take the next step in reaching others for Jesus? And if you answered yes to that last question, I'd love to help you do that. Whether that's teaching you personally how to share the gospel, or maybe you're a pastor who needs some training for your congregation. Or maybe you're in a small group and you're looking for a great study with discussion questions that will teach you and the other members how to share the gospel. If so, there are several ways that I can help you. The first way is to get a copy of my book, Faith Without Fear. To do that, go to faithwithoutfearbook.com. You can also go to jeffjerina.com/books. Secondly, you can enroll in my Faith Without Fear Evangelism training course. To do that, go to jeffjerina.com/courses. That's jeffjerina.com/courses. And then lastly, if you're looking for more one-on-one coaching or maybe even live training for your church or organization, just reach out to me on my contact page at jeffjerina.com/contact. Thanks again. God bless.